Hi guys, come on in. Welcome, welcome. I'll let everybody get in here and we'll see how this goes. Make sure my connection's good. Let's see. There you are. Hi Audra. Yeah, there's a little delay today. It took a little bit to get you on there. Hopefully that means it's a good connection. Hi Joe. Hi Jeannie. Jeannie Wynn in the house. Score, this will be fun. Okay, welcome guys. And you know what they've done on Periscope? They have down below, they have a little emoji of a head. They look like bobblehead dolls of both Hillary and Clinton. It's really funny and very distracting. Hi Reagan, how is everybody? Are you guys ready? And Carrie and Savannah and Candy. Okay, I'm not gonna shout out names anymore. Let's go ahead and get started. Okay, so Jeannie, you're going to kick me because I've been doing this whole thing wrong. I just was talking to Jim and I have been pitching you guys as his latest book being The 5 Times I Met Myself. Hello. Apparently that was last year's book, the one that won all the awards, darn it. But he has a newer one out than that. So all of you guys that I've been pushing for him to get this one book, he's going to have to talk about 2 now. Trouble, right? Okay, so we got a good room in here, but before we get going, Jim is giving us a giveaway. And you guys know me, I'm trying to figure out the best way to do giveaways on Periscope, and it's a little bit of a trick. Hi, Stephanie, you got to come. It's stuttering. I noticed that. It's not just you, it's a lot of them. 2 is awesome. Jim is the coolest. Yes. Welcome, everybody. Okay, so what you have to do to get in on the giveaway is just share on here today. So little guy on the bottom down here, I think he's on the other side on yours. Swipe him out, share on Facebook, share on Twitter. You'll get an entry for both, and I will shout it out next time. There you go. Invite your followers. Retweet. Woohoo! You guys are rocking it. Let's fill the house for this guy. And without further ado, would you guys like to meet our guest? Here he is. All right, you're good, Jim.
Hey guys, great to be here. This should be a lot of fun. Any question, please feel free to ask. Nothing is off limits. Almost nothing.
Almost nothing. Okay, so go ahead and introduce yourself, Jim, and your books, and I liked how you described what kind of genre you write in. I think this group needs to hear your mixy. They want to know what's on your hat, too.
Oh, yeah. So we'll start with that. So it's Holics, Ryder Cup, East versus West. So years ago, I was part of this group of golfers that we would go down to Palm Springs and golf our brains out, like 36 holes a day for 4 days in a row. And so that's where the hat came from. We called ourselves the Golfaholics because we were so addicted to golfing.
That's fun. Okay, do you have your books there? Go ahead and start with your books.
I do. So my first book that came out in 2010 was called Rooms. And this is kind of the one that got a lot of attention and really got me a reputation for writing some strange type books. And we'll talk about the genre in just a moment. The next book that came out was Book of Days. That was my second book, and that came out in 2011. My third book, what was that? The Chair. And this was the first time I was nominated for a Christie Award. I didn't win that year, but that was the first time I was nominated for a Christie Award. Love this book. It's about a relationship between really 2 brothers. That's the heart of the book. And I can tell you what all the books are about if you want to know as well. After those books were with B&H Fiction. Then I moved to Thomas Nelson, and I started writing books for Thomas Nelson. And the first book I wrote for Thomas Nelson was a book called Soul's Gate. And this is actually the first book in a 3-book series called the Wellspring series. And this book actually won the Christie Award in the visionary category for this novel. The novel that followed that up was Memory's Door, and then the series concluded with Spirit Bridge. Then I wrote The 5 Times I Met Myself, which is the book that Cara was talking about that won Book of the Year, the Christie Book of the Year in June. So that's The 5 Times I Met Myself. And then the latest book, the one that just came out, where the heck is that? Is The Long Journey to Jake Palmer. And that just came out in August. So that's me, and that's my books.
Awesome. Okay, so now there's a difference. Some of those have a question premise, and some of them have so you got to talk about your genre, because we got a lot of you crazies in here that do the whole sci-fi fantasy. They need to hear you describe what niche you fall into, because it's such a big canopy. So explain away.
It is. It's a huge canopy. I think the best way, the Christie awards categorize the type of books I write as visionary, and I like that term even better than speculative, because it's looking at story in a new way, whether it's fantasy, whether it's science fiction, whether it's the kind of stuff I do. It's visionary, right? It's pushing the envelope. But the best definition I've seen of the type of genre I write is called slipstream, and nobody's ever heard of it. But you can Google it, and it will explain what it is. Essentially, slipstream is contemporary novels set in contemporary America or other countries, but set in present day, but fantastical things happen within that context. So my books are definitely set in contemporary settings, but they have all these supernatural, fantastical, weird things happening within them.
That's actually kind of cool. Slipstream, huh? Visionary and slipstream. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, so when I've interviewed authors before, they all have a different process of how they get their story ideas. Are you a big question first, a concept? How do these little guys come to you?
So they come to me with the question. I am a big what if person. And when I teach on writing, I teach this. Get me the high concept first. Get me the what if question, and then I just start writing. So for example, with Rooms, my first novel, the question was, wow, what if you could walk into the rooms of your own soul? Wouldn't that be cool? So that's how the book started. With Book of Days, it was, what if you could find God's Book of Days, which is described in Psalm 139? What if you could find that book on earth? And you'd be able to see the past, present, future of your own life, right? So what if you could find the book on earth? With the chair, what if Jesus made a chair that lasted until today? And it was the chair that Jesus sat in when he appeared to the disciples after he was resurrected. And what if that chair had supernatural healing powers? Okay? So that's the what if question for the chair. With the Wellspring series, starting with Soul's Gate, the question is, what if you could send your spirit into other people's souls to fight for their healing and freedom? So that was the question that launched that series. For the 5 times I met myself, what if you could go back and talk to your 23-year-old self or your 15-year-old self and change your present day by what you say to them back then? And then with The Long Journey to Jake Palmer, what if you could find a place at the end of a lake? What if you could find a hidden corridor that would take you to a realm where you would get what you want most in the world? So those are, in I don't know, what, in 2 minutes, I described all my books. And so I always start with that what if question. And then I'm a classic pantser where I just start writing and I see the movie playing in my head and I just write down the movie.
Oh, you're a pantser. I love hearing that. The last several. We have quite a few new people who come in. So let me go ahead and say hi to everybody because we're just getting going. So I'm putting the... Do I still have you all? That was a Periscope glitch. Are you still all there? Jim, his name on the front of the books is James, and he told us that if we're his friends, we get to call him Jim. So we're calling him Jim because y'all are going to be his friend by the end of this, right? We're going to know him. So welcome. I saw several of you in there. Let me go ahead and introduce myself because I think we got some new folks in the room. Cara Grandle here, and I usually do author Writer's Encouragement Show on Tuesday mornings right here, right now at this time. And I sprinkle in author interviews with some of the best of Christian fiction writers and publicists and editors and all kinds of other people. The best. We get the fun ones in here. I saw you come in, Nadine. You were one of them, right? Anyways, those of you who are interested in hanging out with this kind of writers community, you can find us on Author for the Author right here. You can watch the replay or whatever, screenshot it. There's 160 of us that are hanging together and learning together and experiencing it. And Jim is here. He's talking about his books, but we're going to peel back the layers a little bit and talk to the writer side. So for you readers, he just showcased a bunch of books, and we're going to actually have him peel out some more of his friends and favorites that he wants to shout out to as well. But this is also for you readers. So if you're just a reader, you can let me know. But I just wanted to say hi, and then we're going to turn it back to him, and we want to hear about how he actually got started. And honestly, I'm going to tell you, I got to pause. There you go. Jim, you're actually the first guy author I've had on this Periscope show.
Oh my gosh.
And I think that there's something to be said about that because of the whole idea that you have to make a living off of this, and how you balance that. You said you did have another job, but I'd like to hear about that. So how you got started and how you jumped in full-fledged as a full-timer, basically, sort of.
Yeah. So I got started writing by getting shut down entirely, and I'll tell you what I mean by that. So I'm in 7th grade. My mom buys my sister and I the Chronicles of Narnia for Christmas, and I just get enveloped in C.S. Lewis's the Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. I read all 7 of them, devoured them, loved the idea of fantasy, of another realm. I was just captured by this idea of taking story and transforming somebody's life with it, because it transformed my life as an 11-year-old. And so that was the moment where I said, I want to be a writer. I want to be a novelist. That's the moment the dream was born. So in 8th grade, I took journalism class and loved it, just loved the whole thing about writing. I still wanted to write fiction, but I figured this was the way to start learning the craft. And at the end of 8th grade, the journalism teacher, chose the people to be on the school paper. And I wasn't chosen. And that was the moment where I got shut down, because what I believed in that moment is, well, you can't write. If you had any ability, you would have been chosen for the school paper, but you weren't. So that means you can't write. So you might as well give up the dream. And so I gave it up. I'm 13 years old at that time, 12, 13 years old. And I gave up my biggest dream, but the dream wouldn't die, right? So I'd subscribe to Writer's Digest, and I'd go to, every now and then I'd go to a one-day writing seminar, and I would write in secret. But I never showed anybody my writing, and I never told anybody my dream. And really what was going on is, as long as the dream was a dream, it could be real. But if I actually went out and tried and crashed and burned, then it'd be over, and then I'd have nothing. So I didn't do anything with my writing outside of dabbling by myself in private for years and years and years and years. And then finally one day in 2000, my wife says, I'm going on a fast. And I said, really? Why? I don't know. God's just told me to do it. And I said, well, what question are you trying to get answered? I don't know. Well, how long are you going to go for till I get the answer? So just like, okay. And after 24 hours, I said, did God tell you anything? No. After 48 hours, did God tell you anything? No. And so how long are you going to do this, honey, till I get the answer? What's the question? I don't know. And so halfway through day 3, we're in the car together, and it's one of those, proverbial light bulbs that explodes over your head. And I felt, I didn't feel like, I know God's voice was speaking to me. His Spirit was speaking to me and said, Jim, I've given you this desire, and I've given you the ability to write. When are you going to step into your destiny? And I turned to Darcy and I said, Darcy, I know why you're fasting. I'm supposed to be a novelist. And Darcy goes, wait a minute. I've been hungry for 3 days, and you get the answer, right? And so we laughed about that. And after we got done laughing, we got serious and said, all right, you need to go for it. You got to start going for the dream big time. And so I did. And that's when I started writing Rooms. And 5 years later, it was done, and I went through the whole submitting to publishers and getting rejected and pressing through and keep moving, and then finally got a contract in 2008.
Neat. Okay, so tell about that rejections. How much did you have to go through?
Oh, it was crazy, because I had a few people. I had a friend who knew 4 editors, and I sent the proposal out. 3 of them got back and just said, oh, thanks, Jim, for submitting. Nothing, that doesn't really fit what we're doing right now. They were very polite. And the 4th guy writes back, and he says, how long is your manuscript, and is it finished? And I knew a novel had to be finished before you published it, but I knew nothing about writing a novel. I really didn't. And I didn't know how long it was supposed to be. So I wrote back, yes, it's finished, and it's 148,000 words. And all of you, probably most of you, know that that's about a third too long for a novel. And so I wrote back, waiting for him to go, okay, hey, send me the book. And he wrote back, it's not an editor's job to put a manuscript into the type of position where we would consider it. And it was just this, wow, kind of harsh. I wrote back and I said, well, if I get the manuscript into the shape, the word count that you need, would you be interested in it? And he wrote back in capital letters, you don't know how privileged you are that I responded to you. I almost didn't. You might try reading a book, the first 5 pages by Noah Lukeman. And then in capital letters, and exclamation points. This is our last communication. Well, I had read the first 5 pages and devoured it. And so the message I got in my head, once again, was, well, you can't write. You have no ability.
Yeah,
You might as well
brutal.
give it up.
Yeah, you're hurting my feelings over here, and it wasn't even me.
Yeah.
Ah.
And so that same thing started to take me on. So I guess, let me digress just for a minute. For you folks that are trying to go down this publishing road, man, do not let your heart be taken out, because we put ourselves so much into our novels. I mean, it's you, right? You're writing out of the depths of your soul if you're writing a powerful novel. And so when that's rejected, it hurts. I just want to tell you, I get it. I've been through it. Don't let yourself get taken out. Keep pressing on. And it was Darcy again who came to me and said, what are you doing with your novel? Nothing. I'm giving up. I stopped reading fiction. I mean, I was just done with the whole thing. And she was the one that said, no, you got to keep going. You got to keep going. You got to keep going. And I went through a number of other rejections, and one in particular that I got rejected from my dream publisher, who is now my publisher, crazily enough. So I got rejected by Thomas Nelson, and I thought that was going to be it. And I got rejected, and I'm standing out on our back deck, and Darcy comes out and goes, boy, you have a decision to make. You got to decide if you're a writer or not, whether nobody else says it. So you got to make that choice. And that was a huge turning point for me, where I said, you know what? I'm a writer. I know God has called me to do this. Even if I never get published, even if I never have a novel out there, I know I'm a writer because God said it. And I'm just going to continue going down the path. So that's what I'd say to all of you out there that are going, and I don't care if you're not a writer. Maybe you're just a reader. But I don't care what your dream is or what your passion is or what God has put on your heart to do. Don't let yourself be taken out, because God's definition of success is so vastly different than ours. Our definition is fame, awards, money, etc. His definition is very simple. Did you try? With the gifts I've given you, did you try? Did you go for it? So yes. I'm done preaching now.
Yeah, well, you're getting all kinds of little comments. People are they're hearting it up, and they're actually participating with you with their comments. And actually, one of the questions I was going to ask you was based off of the 5 times I met myself. What would you tell yourself at 23? So now that's the encouraging word that you give people overall. But as far as facing the industry and the work of it and the tour and the routine of it and all that you know now, looking back, what would you tell yourself if you were back at the beginning before you got jumped in as far as you are now?
I'd tell myself 2 things that are totally contradictory. The first thing I tell myself at 23 is, Jim, go for it, man. Write your brains out. Go for it. And I'd explain that the success is, did you do your best with what you have? I mean, a lot of guys love basketball. Not everybody's going to be Michael Jordan, right? So, but with the basketball ability you do have, go for it as much as you can. So that's the first thing I'd say is I go, Jim, man, right. This is your passion. You've known it since 7th grade. Go for it. And the other thing I'd say to myself is, it's okay. It's okay. If you don't write, if you don't pick up that pen, if you don't grab the laptop and write those stories, you know what? That's okay too. In other words, I would give myself grace, because what I learned through this book, The 5 Times I Met Myself, which is a book about regret and looking back and should I have made different choices, we hammer ourselves, right? I don't care if you're 20 years old, you hammer yourself for stuff you did when you were 10. I don't care if you're 60, you hammer yourself for 10, 20, 30, 40. You continue to hammer yourself. And God says, my grace is sufficient. It is enough. It's okay. Because if we have a God that loves us, and not just loves us, but, passionately loves us, if we do have the type of God who is looking, standing on the porch looking for us to come home after we've been in the city for 3 years, blowing all the money. If he's looking and is sprinting towards us and showering us with kisses, if we really have a God that loves us like that, then it's okay. It's okay.
So you tell yourself to go for it, and then you take the pressure off of yourself.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, that's awesome. Okay, so now I do know I got a couple fellas in the room that are looking to potentially be writers, and yet they're the primary, that is what they are in their home. It's not what everybody has to be. We know all that PC stuff, but what would you say to fellas who are trying to make it a career?
Yeah, I'd say you start small. Just start doing the work. For example, when I wrote Rooms, my boys were young. My boys are 23 and 21 now, but that was 10 years ago, 12 years ago that I wrote that book, started writing that book. And it's like, they're young and I want to be involved in their life. And I had a full-time job as a marketing guy, right? Marketing advertising guy. So how in the heck do I write this book? And what I said to myself is, anybody can do anything for 20 minutes a day. You have 20 minutes a day. I don't care what it takes. I got to cut out a TV show. I got to get up 20 minutes earlier. I got 20 minutes a day. And so I started writing the book, and I wrote a lot of Rooms 20 minutes a day. So those guys that want to go for it, start writing the book. Start writing it.
Okay, I want to... It's weird today. Okay, I want to shout out to him. Did you guys hear what he just said about having a second job in the marketing world? If you've been on with me a long time, you probably heard me talk about his podcast. He does a podcast with Thomas Umstattd Jr., and it's been going on for a long time. I looked this morning. They have 88 episodes. So it's 88 free lessons from a guy who knows marketing mixed with another guy who's got to be the best tech-savvy guy I know, who can make it sound like everyday English when he's talking to you. So I saw that, Joe. I'll catch it. So here's the screenshot if you want to go find his podcast. It's www.novelmarketing.com. But it's a podcast, so you can actually get it on your app on your smartphone if you do the podcast app that way. So it's 15 or 20 minute hits of two very, very intelligent guys telling you how to do it. And the part that I really like best is it doesn't matter how non-tech savvy you are versus tech savvy. They bring in a concept. They help you understand what they're talking about before they ever tell you how to do it. So it's almost like you can re-listen to some of them and as you gain experience and knowledge. So it's very, very cool. Yes, can you listen all the time? So, and then I also want to remind you again, he's doing a giveaway, and which one are we giving away? The five times or the new one, the Jake Palmer one?
Wow, that's tough. Cara, do you want to make that call?
Yeah, well, one of each.
Let's do one of each.
One of each. Okay, so if you want in on the giveaway, you gotta share. You gotta swipe on the little guy down here and share out on Facebook and Twitter. You can get one for Facebook and one for Twitter, and I know I've already had some of you guys who've done that. So we'll get the word out. This will continue to ricochet around in the World Wide Web, and it helps him out, helps us out, so it's all good. Okay, so I'm gonna turn it back around to him, and I want you to talk about your day, your routine, and how long it takes you to write a book, and and your good news that you had that you showed me on a white piece of paper yesterday.
Oh, yeah. So my routine. So I've been like this since I was a kid, where some people have one hobby or no hobbies. I've always had a million different hobbies, and I guess it shows in a way how random I am. How random I am. Not good at grammar. How random I am. And that works with my lifestyle in terms of, part of my day is doing marketing stuff. Part of my day is doing writing. Part of my day is doing the podcast. I also voice my own books. I do the audio versions of my own book. And right now I'm voicing another author's book. So I do all these different things all the time. And that really works for me, because I do like a lot of randomness. How that works in terms of my writing, I don't have I write X amount per day. These days I write to the deadline. In other words, I go, okay, this next book, my next book is due March 1st. So I have a timetable, and I know when I need to start writing, how many words per day. And once that time period starts, then I stick to that routine. But I'm not like a lot of writers who say, I write every day of the year, half an hour or 2 hours a day. It just depends on the season. So coming up, I'll be writing, 4 hours a day. But right now, I haven't been writing, at least fiction, I haven't been writing for, 3 or 4 months now.
Do you, you said you were a pantser, so are you chewing on your idea the whole time, this 3 or 4 months? Do you have it, is it your company all the time thinking about that book?
No, yeah. So I'm definitely thinking about my company and marketing, and because I do a lot of one-on-one with authors, so I'm thinking about that. But I'm also, the book is brewing in my mind, and I'm writing scenes in my mind. Can't help it. And so I guess I'm doing a little bit of writing as I go along.
All right, and free us all from research. This is the best thing ever. This is my favorite.
You know, every writing seminar I go to or conference, or a lot of them, I should say, there's always a workshop on research, and I'm just like, yeah, I can't do that. I can't go to the research because I don't research my books. And people will say that have read my books, maybe some of you have read my books, it's like, no, you've got a lot of technical stuff in there. What do you mean you didn't research it? What I mean by that is I'm a voracious reader. I love to read all types of things, fiction, nonfiction, magazine articles, and this kind of thing. And so, for example, in Book of Days, where's Book of Days? So this Book of Days, my protagonist, my main guy, is this serious rock climber. Well, I've never done rock climbing, but I've always been fascinated by it. So over the years, I've always read all these articles on rock climbing. So it's already in my head. My first book, Rooms, right? Rooms is set in Cannon Beach. Well, I did no research on Cannon Beach because my family vacationed there every year for 8 years. So it was already in my head. So all of my books, the research is already done just through life experience, and then I just take it and put it in the books. Which works if you write
Slipstream, right? That's the way it works if you write this contemporary stuff. Okay, and actually, one of our regulars, Joe, he wants to know if you like having defined your own genre, or if is that a pain? Does it bring its own obstacles?
Oh, finding your own genre definitely brings its own obstacles. By that I mean, one of the reasons, so I got an agent in spring of 2006. I got an agent, and he shopped it to all the major publishers, and all the major publishers basically came back and said, well, here's the deal. This guy can write a little bit, but we have no idea where to put his book, right? It doesn't fit anywhere. And so we can't fit it in a genre. And so that is a challenge because the bookstores and people want to know, well, what kind of fiction do you write? And so that's a challenge from the bookstore's perspective, from the publisher's perspective, from the reader's perspective. In the other sense, people say, oh my gosh, your books are some of the most unique books I've ever read. There's just no books like yours out there. And so on one hand, it's really great because it makes you stand out. It's a negative because people can't easily go, oh, you're suspense, you're romance, you're sci-fi. So.
Right. Okay, audience, don't forget you guys can ask your questions now. I'm ready to receive your questions, but I'm going to address what you just said. You said one of the things I looked at when I was trying to figure out how wrong I was about what I speculated about you was that several of your books are actually on Amazon under different categories. Like they didn't even keep you the same on all of your books, which is kind of crazy. So that really tells you how hard it is for them to find. But one of the things that I feel like is happening, even in my newbiness, is that the whole genre is changing. It's like the whole industry is opening up their perspective for a whole bunch of newness. I feel like there's so much more, especially in the Christian market. There's so many more, the spec and the fantasy and the dystopian and all of the time bending and fairy tale retelling. All of that feels like it's just in the last few years that it's really starting to come out and have a market and actually be successful. It's actually kind of fun to watch. So I think we probably owe you a little bit of thank you on that, because if you get tested in the market and you're successful, you make a way for people behind you. So Vonnie Harris, our Alaska friend, she wants to know if you, how you know when a book is ready for submission. How much do you edit yourself? How much do you know until it's ready?
That's such a great question, and the quick answer is you don't. That's part of the problem with being too close to the trees to see the forest. That's why it is so critical to have 3, maybe 4 people who you absolutely trust them to be honest with you, and number 2, understand fiction enough to give you a helpful critique. I have 3 people who are my beta readers, still my beta readers, where I will send them the manuscript and go, what do you think? What's working? What's not working? And I trust their feedback. The problem is a lot of times beginning authors will get together and then they're critiquing each other's work. The problem is you got to have somebody that's had some success and really understands what a novel has to be successful. That's why going to writers' conferences, starting to get to know people, making contacts. I was very fortunate in that I went to conferences before I started submitting anything, and got to know people who ended it, published novelists like Tricia Goyer and Randy Ingermanson, and I became friends with a guy named Mick Silva, brilliant editor, where I could send them stuff and go, well, okay, am I off base or not? Susie Warren became a dear friend and I hired her even after I got my contract. I got my first contract for Rooms, and I hired Susie to edit the book, even though it was going to get edited, because I wanted to make sure that I was understanding how to write a novel. And so, unfortunately, it's one of those things where you have to decide, am I really serious about it? And you might have to put some money into hiring a decent editor.
Okay, we got a couple more questions. I got that one, Joe, just so you know. So they want to know what's next for you, as well as put that together with what your next question is that you're going to be answering.
Oh, yeah. So what's next for me is, I guess you alluded to this, Cara, a little bit earlier, but I'm just about to sign a new contract with Thomas Nelson. So I'm going to do 2 more books with them, which I'm thrilled about. They've been a wonderful publisher. So that's coming up for me. The other thing that's coming up for me, which is going to be really interesting and really fun, is for the first time I am going to write with another author. And not only write with another author, I'm going to indie publish. And the other author is Susan May Warren, or a lot of you know her as Susie Warren, and we are going to write an episodic series. By that I mean it's not going to be a novel. It's going to be 6 individual novels, like a TV episode. And on top of that, we're going to do something very, very fun. We're going to release it in physical form. We're going to release it as an ebook, and we're going to release it as an audiobook, because it's like I said, I voice my own books, so I can do that. So we're going to release, you get all 3, and it's going to come out once a month for 6 months, and that'll be the first season, and then we're going to do it again. And it's the story of a time-traveling detective. So we're really excited about it. And we're going to start working on that after the first of the year.
So they actually, one of the questions was what you thought about being a hybrid, being, you know what I mean by that, by being both independently published and traditionally published. So I think you sort of just, isn't that how you're going to do the thing with Susie? Yeah. So do you have any advice for somebody who's coming up to either be hybrid or independently published? Do you have any advice for them?
Well, most people want to be traditionally published. There's a huge desire for that, right? Because there's a certain validation in that, but that's kind of slipping away as you see more and more people be successful independently. So I don't think there's anything wrong with continuing to try to be traditionally published. It's just that there are fewer and fewer slots. In fiction, has not been selling over the last 4 or 5 years. Fiction sales overall, not just the speculative category, but overall sales have severely declined. And so I would encourage people, absolutely go for the indie thing. I'm doing it for the first time, right? Because I think there's something exciting to be learned there, because I'm going to have to do a lot of the stuff my publisher has done. And there's a chance to make more money, right?
Right.
So if you go into Barnes & Noble and buy one of my books, I make 95 cents. Awesome. If you buy one of my books independently, I'll probably make $3, right? So there is a little bit more financial incentive. But, and this is a big but, you got to make sure you have the craft ready first. I hate to see people indie publish before the book is ready to be published. And that's why we go back to this question of, how do I know if it's ready? Well, you got to get some people that will be brutally honest with you, and you probably have to spend some time to hire a good macro editor that'll come in and go, hey, you got some things to work on first, and that's okay.
All right. I think that was, this just came to me right when you're doing that. Do you have any, off the top of your head, do you have any people that you know who are good macro editors who do that as a service that these people can approach? Because some of them are kind of higher end and it's hard to get there. So if they decided to be serious, take their time, put their money where their heart is, and go for it. Do you have, off the top of your head, 2 or 3 people that you would name out?
Well, I would definitely get hooked up with Susie's My Book Therapy. Her How to Write a Novel. She's got all these resources. She's got this community of other people. The techniques that Susie teaches, I would encourage people to join her community. A lot of the material is absolutely free, and then if you like it, you can go deeper and you can start subscribing. But the thing I love about Susie is she has done it. It's not just, here's the material, hope it works for you. You can look at her students and go, okay, Beth Vogt, right?
Right.
Brand new, didn't know how to write. I want to try this novelist thing. She just won a Carol Award, right, for her book. So it's like Susie's techniques work. They're proven again and again and again. She has had her students become traditionally published and winning awards. And so I would definitely point people there. The other thing you can do is on the Novel Marketing Podcast, we have a whole episode on how to find a good editor.
All right. Okay. They're pulling me back to have you answer the second half of the question about what's next for you. They want to know on your own projects that you're not writing with Susie, what that's going to be about. Can you even tell us? Is it too new? And
well, your people are sharp.
Yes,
here.
they are. Did you leave that off on purpose? Because sometimes you don't know yet.
Well, I realized I didn't answer that, and I thought, okay, if they come back, I'm going to have to see if I can put this succinct, because so much is just flowing in my head. But I will describe it as this. There's a movie that came out quite a while ago called The Family Man with Nicolas Cage and Tia Leone. And he is a man that basically does not choose his wife when they're young. He goes to London, says, I'll be back in a year, we're going to get married. Doesn't. Then he gets a chance to go back and see what life would have been like if he had stayed and married her. Okay? So we have that set up over here. And then we have the classic story of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, which I don't need to describe that. I think everyone knows what that story is about. So essentially, my book is going to be The Family Man meets Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde.
Crazy. Okay, so what's your pace? You got a 2-book contract that haven't even quite signed yet. What kind of timeline are you usually on? What timeline will that be on?
Yeah, so the first book will be due March 1st, and then the second book will be due at the end of 2017. So I'll get this one done in about 6 months, and then I'll have, I guess about 9 months to get the next one done.
All right. That's a lot of information. I'm turning it. I recap some of the highlights that people say, and he has like half a book here worth, but I want to go back. Some of you guys are catching this on the replay. You're still eligible for the giveaway if you're on the replay, so heart it up and share it out, Twitter and Facebook style, and you'll get into the drawing. But he taught us about a new genre, slipstream or visionary. He talked about contemporary with the fantastical mixed in, which is pretty cool anyways. What did you say? They said he was a secret writer at the beginning of his career. He didn't let people know because once he actually stepped into it, he had to own that, success or fail. So there's if you're a secret writer in the house, that means there's a time coming when you'll have to decide if you're really after this or not. I do like a lot of the references that he talks about starting his career not knowing anything. He jumped in, like writing a 148,000 word novel and having that painful exchange with them. But the learning curve is massive, but you just got to get in and start going. The only way to learn this whole thing is to just start chewing it off one bite at a time. He said a phrase, and I just think it's super powerful. And he said, don't let your heart be taken out. Don't let your heart be taken out. And you put that together with what he said about knowing for yourself that you're going to be a writer no matter who says what to you. That is the essence and the core of our Writer's Encouragement Show. That is really what we do, is we remind each other over and over again that there's a long haul, long vision, and what he does when he ties it before the Lord, when he talks about our relationship with the Lord. There's some obedience here, doing exactly what we're supposed to do for right now. Hang the rest one day at a time, right? So, there's a million more things he talked about, but those are the kind of things that I want to recap. I'm going to open it up one more time for more questions, so you better hurry up and get them typed in there because we're about ready to be done. And when I turn it around to him, I want you, Jim, to shout out if you have any other favorite reads or any reference books that were magic for you in the process of understanding this career, then share away. Here you go. There you go. It's on you now.
All right. So craft books, the ones I get, the ones I go back to and read, fundamentals, right? Plot and Structure by James Scott Bell, just phenomenal book. I'd buy that one. The next book I'd buy is Writing Fiction for Dummies, which is in the Dummies category book. That's by Randy Ingermanson. Great book. I would buy Self-Editing for Fiction Writers, which is kind of a classic in the industry. Just fundamental things that I see mistakes made again and again and again. This book will help you figure those things out. And then finally, The Story Equation. This is a book that Susie Warren just came out with very recently. Just phenomenal book on figuring out the structure of a novel. Because I don't care if you feel like this, but it's like, no, I can't have structure to my novel. It's got to be creative. It's got to flow. And if I put science and this on it, it's going to be in a box. It's not true. It's not true. There is a formula. there's a great podcast, or sorry, not a great podcast. You should Google this, The Hollywood Formula. And it tells you why are certain movies in Hollywood successful. So there is a structure that you can learn. And Susie's book, The Story Equation, is probably the best I've read at distilling that down into a way that you can apply it to your novel. So those are the craft books I would get and study. And then in terms of books that have knocked me out recently, I read a book by, what's his name, Charles Martin. And it's called Long Way Gone. And, oh my gosh, that book had, the tears were flowing for that book. And that book's here's the interesting thing, that book is very definitely set contemporary, but has a little bit of fantastical elements in it as well. I wouldn't call his and my genre similar, but my gosh, you want to talk about a book that's going to open up your heart. That one did it for me.
Neat. Okay, so there was one last question. And they want to know, with all the conferences that you've been to, is there one you would recommend over another?
If you're writing fiction, I would go to ACFW. It's an expensive conference by the time you pay for hotel and airfare and that kind of thing, but it is the conference if you are writing fiction, because all the editors are there, all the publishers are there. You have a lot of authors that come there. The sessions, the teaching, the workshops are great. So if you can afford that conference, that's the one I'd go to.
All right. Okay. And do you have one for nonfiction? I mean, with your experience, have you seen one because we do have nonfictioner people. I know that's not your main forte, but.
Yeah, that's for nonfiction. I would suggest any of the regional conferences, like Mount Hermon's a great conference, and they have a lot of good nonfiction tracks. What's another good one? The Florida Christian Writing Conference is a good one because it's balanced. Blue Ridge is another great conference that's balanced for both fiction and nonfiction. So if you're somebody that goes, you know what, Jim, I don't even know exactly if I want to write fiction or nonfiction. Blue Ridge, Florida Christian Writers, the Oregon Christian Writers Conference, which I'm part of every year, and that's for folks on the West Coast. That's another great conference, which offers both fiction and nonfiction.
Okay. I have one last question, I think, and that's because you said that it sounds to me like you got your agent before you got your first contract.
Yes.
How did you get your agent?
So how I got my agent was, I'll tell you the story quickly, but I go to Mount Hermon, and you can submit your manuscript to two people ahead of time. I submit my manuscript to an editor and an agent. Both reject me. And I was so intimidated by that. I just thought, okay, my skin was so thin. And I thought, you know what? So what? They rejected me. I still got to build relationships. And so I started building relationship with this editor. And by the end of the conference, we were buddies. And I had a really good conference, and I had people asking for my manuscript. And so I said to him, I need to get an agent. Can you give me any recommendations? And so he's recommending agents for me to talk to and this kind of thing. Well, during that process, he leaves editing and becomes an agent. And he emails me and goes, hey, when are you going to send me your stuff? I want to look at it.
So who is your agent?
Well, that was my first agent, Chip McGregor. He's no longer my agent, but that was Chip McGregor. And so Chip and I became buddies. We both do sleight of hand, right? We both used to be semi-pro magicians. And so we got to know each other and formed this relationship so that by the time he left Time Warner and became an agent, it was like, now we're friends. And he's like, Jim, hey, be my client. And so I guess my point about all that is, yes, you can absolutely get an agent by just sending a query. That happens all the time. But relationships, like in any business, are so critical. So I encourage you, if you can afford it, or even if you can't, go to the smaller conferences and start building relationships. Like Randy Ingermanson always says, don't think contracts, think contacts. Get to know people.
Oh, that's powerful.
Relationship.
And I'm stuck on the whole semi-professional magician, because you said you were a guy with tons of hobbies, and that's probably the coolest hobby ever. And it's one of the things I love about the writing community is because usually there's layers underneath these people. I don't think I'll forget that. Have you ever had to do any magic in front of a group of authors?
Oh, I have. In fact, at ACFW last August, I taught a continuing ed class, and I did some magic in class.
Yeah, I took your public speaking class. We got a toilet paper roll. That was your visual aid on that one. Okay, guys, go ahead and shout out your thank yous, and let's wrap this up and say goodbye to our happy guest here. Go ahead and hold up your last 2 books for us so that they can see it and take a screenshot. If you want to shout out your thank yous and appreciate him for coming. Yeah, they're so enjoying it. There you go, guys. There's his next one. And remember what we do in here. If you get your hands on one of these, jump in there and write them a review. That's how the wheel keeps cranking them out, right? Let's get good reviews. All kinds of thank yous. They're thanking you like hearts up galore and thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. So, have a good day, guys, and I'll be on later this week to do the normal Writer's Encouragement Show at a random time. I have no idea when that will be. But before I go, remember that next Tuesday at the same time is Christy Ann Hunter, and she's a Regency. Talk about a completely different genre. But she's a newbie author. I think she's up to 3 books now out. So come join me next Tuesday, same time, same place, and we'll see you later. Have a good day. Bye, guys.